Hey guys, welcome to the Something New Show. I'm Mindy, your host, and we like to talk about how to live a life worth celebrating. And today in the studio, we have a special guest. We have Miss Brooke Warnock, and I cannot wait for you to get to know her better. She has a heart to connect with all types of people to inspire spiritual, emotional, and relational health. And it all started about 15 years ago as she and her husband figured out how to run Lost Valley Ranch, a 63-year-old four-diamond guest ranch here in Colorado, while raising her 5 kids in the middle of nowhere in the mountains. She became passionate about leading her team well and inspiring the guests through her gift of hospitality. And then this led her and her husband to the Paterson Center about 6 years ago, where she was changed by the whole life planning process, that now she herself has begun her own business, leading others through the same process as a certified personal center guide, Paterson Center guide. Paterson. So I am just like so honored to have you, first of all.
Thank you.
Fun story is we're actually friends in real life. She's not just a guest today on my show, but we recently got connected when you moved to Colorado Springs, which is great to have you here, by the way. Our kids go to the same school. And our very first hangout was people telling us you should know each other. And I was like, okay, well, I have limited availability, just like I'm sure she does. And I said, would you want to walk together? Because whenever I have a moment in not a Zoom call, it's great to get my steps in. And she was like, yes. And I was like, all right, I found my girl. She's down for steps. And so I'll never forget that day. And it was just a blast because I didn't know much about you, but as I've gotten to know you, I just so respect the work that you're doing and even how it led you to the work, because there was so much prior to this. And 5 kids, first of all, is no joke. Working with your spouse, which I think we should talk about today, was no joke.
For sure, we should talk about.
Definitely. And I mean, the time at the ranch led you to a season of exploration and saying, hey, what's this Paterson Center thing? Like, what is this life mapping thing? So why don't we go back a little bit and say, how was that time at the ranch? What all were you doing there? And what did you enjoy the most about your work there?
So, yeah, we've been on quite an adventure, I would say. I think that when I married my husband, initially I kind of knew, like, if I'm marrying this man that wears a cowboy hat every day, I'm probably going on an adventure. So, people ask, like, did I plan on this? Is this what I saw?
You were not raised on a ranch or anything. This was like...
It's actually very ironic.
Yes.
I'm a country club girl.
From the South. And then you met your cowboy.
Yes. In fact, I met him when I was in a sorority at University of Arkansas, and I was a college staff girl at Lost Valley, and he was the head wrangler, and he's older than I am by about 9 years. And so as a naive college girl, I was just flitting about and loved this summer job that I came across through a mutual guy friend. And I remember one of the funny stories is that when I was getting on my horse, because I rode with the teenagers, so I helped, take teenagers on horseback out into the mountains at this guest ranch. And one of my memories, and one of my husband's favorite memories, is that he was helping me get on my horse, and I looked down at him and I just said, I love it when you help me get on my horse. And he's thinking, oh, this is my, she's flirting a little. And I ended the statement with, it reminds me of this guy in my life that's just like my uncle. And so I think he quickly realized, okay,
this was not the category.
She needs to grow up a little. She needs to grow up a little. So, I was not thinking of him that way. But a couple years down the road, he was leaving the ranch. I had left the ranch. And he was in grad school in Dallas, and we spent about 5 years of the beginning of our engagement, or dating, engagement, and marriage in Dallas. And then we moved back to the ranch in 2007. And we both had a heart for, I call it creative hospitality. I mean, it really is, it's hospitality, but in a pretty unique way. And we both had a heart for that. And we knew, because we both had been so changed by Lost Valley and our time there on staff, that we went back and thought, well, let's just get some experience there. But we had no idea we'd take over. And so about 3 years after, we had, at that point, had 3 kids, and because we had babies real close together. All 5 of my kids are really close together. And so at that point, we realized, oh, we're in this for the long haul. And so we ran the ranch for the last 12 years.
And I just want to testify to the quality of leadership you have, because before I even met you, I had several employees come to my company from the ranch, and they had extremely good customer service skills. And they all told me they learned it at the ranch. They had a really mindful awareness of others. And to me, that's something that is definitely taught. And so I just want to compliment you guys, because those Lost Valley team members are definitely leaders in every way.
Yeah, it's one of our favorite parts of that job, and that part of our story was getting to pour into that age group. So what Lost Valley does is they take on average, 20 to 25-year-olds. They're usually in college or right out of college, and we develop them. We develop them relationally. We develop them emotionally and spiritually, and it really has been one of the you're experiencing maybe the fruit on the other side, but I grew up there. I really did grow up there as a mom, as a mentor, as a young leader, as a wife, and I think that we always call Lost Valley, it's just this little pressure cooker out in the mountains for humanity and for relationships. And, there's no escape. You live down a 9-mile dirt road. There's no cell service. You really are off the grid, but you're doing it with all these people, all these different types of people. And you're really having to eat, work, play with them. I mean, there's just no getting out of the relationship. And I think it creates a rare experience where we have to make sure in the process we're real healthy. But I also think in that process, I realized when we are working on ourselves so intensely, it's amazing what kind of hospitality that creates for our guests coming in, maybe just for a weekend or for the week, where they get something that feels, I never know exactly what words to use, but it feels authentic. It feels full of integrity. It feels safe, and it feels wholesome. And I think that level of hospitality comes from what we're doing within the community of the staff.
Yeah, definitely. So, okay, you worked with your husband that whole time.
Yes.
Maybe you tell us some things that you learned from working with your spouse, some do's and don'ts. If you can think of one or two do's and one or two don'ts.
Mm-hmm. In fact, Mindi and I realized, you and I realized right before we started this, you're moving into working with your spouse more closely, and I'm moving out of it now that we have moved off Lost Valley.
I don't know what that says about us, but
well, just that we have a lot to talk about.
Yeah,
we have a lot more to talk about in our friendship. But I will say that my first 5 years of working with him so closely were really challenging. Now, part of it was that I was still so young. And I didn't know, as a young mom, I didn't always know. I was insecure about my gifts and talents and what I brought to the table that was unique. And I was married. I'm married to a very strong man, and I myself am very strong. And I remember our premarital counselor saying, when it's good, it's going to be really good. When it's hard, just watch out. It's just going to be hard. It's just going to be hard. That's just our personalities. We, sometimes the sparks fly. And so we definitely needed to fine tune, I'd say. And it was almost, after taking over the ranch, I bet it was another 5 years after that we finally landed, based on a friend's referral. We landed in a guy named Pete Richardson's office, and he was the co-founder and owner at the time of Paterson Center. And we did our own LifePlan. And it was because we were desperate. It was because there were just too many sparks flying. And I felt lost out there. And it's Lost Valley's it's a lonely place for a mom and for a wife and a family.
Because traffic is constantly coming in and going, so you don't really have community.
That's right.
That's long term.
That's right. And so we were here part time in Colorado Springs and trying to divide our time, but even that, it's just when you're not here full time. You and I became friends finally when I moved here full time, and got to engage more intentionally. But we had some pain points. And
do you have any general definitely do this, don't do that for couples working together?
Know each other's gifts and elevate them. just know each other, study, just like we need to know ourselves in that way. I think when you work with a spouse that closely, it's important that you know each other and what you're good at, what you're not good at, so that there really is safe ground to be good at things and not be good at things. And then to really call out each other's value. I mean, Tony had to learn, and I did too. I had to learn, like, in his strong leadership that sometimes made me frustrated. I realized that a lot of people respected him in the process, even though I was having a hard time respecting him at home. But when I started seeing his gifts play out outside of the home, and I say that to almost any married couple, really, almost every bright side has a shadow side. And so when you see those gifts played out in real time out in the world, and I got a front row seat to it in his leadership, sometimes when it comes home, it's not as lovely. It's not as easy to live with. But remembering that the brighter side, remembering that actually is a gift that impacts the world around you, and in a good way, in a positive way, even if it's driving you crazy, even if it kind of gets under your skin at home. And then calling that out in each other. So, like, he learned after a life plan, especially, he learned, oh, my wife really has these specific gifts and talents that she brings to this whole scenario out at Lost Valley Ranch. And he started depending on me for those. And he started asking my advice in those areas. And he started giving me a voice that was a little more specific in the area of hospitality, for sure. And then I would say in the area of relationship and staff development and things that maybe he had kind of, just not been as intentional about.
I love that. Well, you're making me so curious about the life planning now.
Yes.
So I think we should hop over, maybe for those of us that aren't as familiar,
Yes.
What does a life planning session look like? Because it's not just an hour. Mm-hmm. And what are the hopeful outcomes from doing a life plan with somebody like yourself?
Yeah. So after, I love that I am a life plan facilitator now because I was a recipient of it. I love that that's the part of my story. So when I decided, my vision statement that came, we call it a purpose statement, actually at Paterson Center, that came out of my life plan, even 3 years before I decided to get trained in it, was I exist to connect with people in order to inspire relational, emotional, and spiritual health. All I saw was, how can I apply that? Side note, because of the ranch, I had to homeschool my 5 children. And let's just say that wasn't my strong suit. It was survival. It tapped into a lot of areas of weakness of mine instead of gifts. But I had to figure that out because we were out there in the middle of nowhere and had to figure out how to homeschool.
I'm sure that wasn't easy.
And so part of my life plan revelation was realizing I could bring that to all roles, even if the role didn't fit me perfectly. Even if I had to do things or were asked to do things that maybe weren't, I didn't feel super fulfilled in, I could still bring a big piece of me and the best piece of me to even homeschooling my kids, or to being a wife and doing that for my husband, or, at times there were admin things at the ranch I had to do, or I had to keep up with details, and I'm not great at details. And so just learning how to also remember that the end goal, and really the journey all along the way, I can still keep that dangling carrot of my purpose statement, that all of those things do produce emotional, relational, and spiritual health. And so that purpose statement has driven me for the last 5 years.
So that's one of the things you do with the life plan. You write a purpose statement.
That's one of the things. So now that I am doing it full time, what it entails is an individual can hire me in order to sit down for 2 days, kind of leave their life, leave their existence, their normalcy,
job, their family. Yes.
And for 2 days, they sit with me and we do a life plan. And what it is, it's a very, a little bit of the history behind it is that Tom Paterson was a innovator, and he was in the corporate world, and he realized that so much of the methodology and stratop of what he was using for corporations could be applied to even personal lives.
For sure.
So it's a real Socratic method of excavating where you've been, where you are today, and where you're headed. And so
maybe like looking for themes as far as like, okay, where's a theme in your life? Where are things that keep coming up again?
Yes. It honestly, look at Paterson Center website is a great place to really look at what it is. I have my own website as well, but they do a much more in-depth dive into really the background. But it is, what I love about it is it's just super practical. It is different than counseling or therapy, or it really is trying to make a roadmap for your life. And the belief is that if we don't have vision for where we're headed, and we don't have even a strategy on how to get there, then it's amazing how fears creep in. It's amazing how insecurities stop us and hinder what we...
Like even from dreaming more to do
That's
something
right.
maybe in the second phase of your life or...
Yes. I get a lot of clients that are empty nesters all of a sudden, and they feel a little lost because they still feel young and vibrant and have something to give the world, but they don't have kids under roof anymore. And so they want to dream a little, but they want to dream strategically. And they want it to, I would say a word we use a lot is just, what is your greatest contribution? And that typically is where your gifts and talents align to inform you of your passion, and then how you would use that to make your greatest contribution.
Say that one more time because that was so good.
So, what we are trying to get to in a life plan is where our gifts and talents align to inform us of our passion that would then tell us what our greatest contribution is. And it's one of the incredible pieces of it is going back to see how your story was written, and that you really do have a unique story in all of history, and seeing how maybe there's some things you need to throw off, right? Some hindrances and insecurities and fears, but maybe there's some things that you didn't realize are just like a good movie, right? Like a good storyline or a good timeline. You didn't realize that needs to continue. And just like watching a good movie, there's so many plot lines that we can learn from. And so that's an important piece. That's kind of the reflection piece. And then the where are we today is really excavating gifts and talents. And then where are we headed is, in a business world, it's the AIPs. It's what initiatives do we need to take to get there? And so it's real practical, which I like that part of it. And it makes sense in my head, and it's ordered, and it's methodical. And
yeah. Well, I was going to say, and do clients go home then with like their step-by-step plan of what's next?
So at the end of it, you get a digital playbook. We call it the digital playbook, and they can re-engage it. They can do refreshes. It's really a lifelong tool that they learn along the way how to utilize. So it's not the end is not the end of our appointment.
Right.
It's really something that assists along the way.
Well, I love that it's like, I feel stirred up to think about dreaming too. Like, I think so many people I talk to anyways feel like either they're not qualified, it's too late. How do I begin? Where do I start? Who's going to even care? Do you know what I mean? Like, there's all these tough obstacles in their mindset, truly, because I think that's just a mindset problem. But there's all these obstacles in their brain. And I'm thinking if they sat through a life planning session, how that could really kind of map it out for you to say, okay, like from here are some next steps, because there are so many things that it's not too late to start.
Absolutely.
So many things.
My most fruitful life plans have been people later in life, because I think there is such truth to when we know ourselves and when we are comfortable with our skin, it's easier for the inside to match the outside of our existence. And I think that, I think when, like I shared, the empty nester stage is, if it's in the late 50s, early 60s, there's still a lot of life to live. And so I love meeting with people in that stage of life. But I'm most experienced working with 20-year-olds. So
okay, we have a lot of listeners also in that age group. I have all the age group. What would you say is like, okay, 20-year-olds, here's here's some fire advice I have for you.
Fire advice I have for 20-year-olds. Say a lot of yeses. Say a lot of yeses. Kind of grab the bull by the horns. I think that I'm seeing, for whatever reason, I'm not sure what the trend is, but I'm seeing the 20s to 30-year-old be more paralyzed by making the wrong decisions or not, feeling like, oh, I'm stepping into this job. Is this going to be my lifelong career? And just being paralyzed by that. And what I usually say, I mean, I had, 20 to 25-year-olds at the ranch. And of course they were in a place.
You're a pro with them.
Well, I'm a pro with them, but I'm also, they were literally killing time out there, a lot of them. Never dreaming that their career would lead to being a cowboy or cowgirl or a waitress or a housekeeper or, all the roles they played out there. But they were in such a vulnerable state. They were in such a transitional state. And it was my pleasure to watch them launch. And I do think some of the healthier individuals that, I worked with were individuals who just went out and said yes unapologetically.
Yeah, I'll try that, or I'll do that.
Yeah. And I love that they get different bosses, and I love that they learn how to work, whether it's in a dress shop or out on a ranch. I mean, it really is life experience that brings you to that place where you are comfortable in your skin and you do know what you're good at and what you're not good at. And so all of those experiences are valuable.
Yeah, and I think that just from my experience with girls saying yeses to things, or even men too, but yeses to opportunities, and if it's not the right one, it's okay. You can redirect. Like, it's fine. It's not a big deal to pivot and be like, you know what, that wasn't for me.
That's
and
right.
at least you tried, because I feel like you can steer a moving car, but you can't steer a parked one. And so just being like, don't be so afraid. Like, if it doesn't work out, you'll try something new,
That's right.
So I love that you encourage people to do a lot of yeses. Mm-hmm. Any other fire advice that comes to my mind are about?
Know thyself. That's a message I give a lot. Do the work of, even if you're not paying someone to sit in a life plan, there are ways that you can reflect and contemplate about how things, being honest with yourself. Like, if you have a moment, if one of your employees, Mindi, one of these girls, has a moment where they feel angry, I always said, at the end of the day, take inventory of those moments, because they're usually an indicator of a core value, of something that feels maybe violated, but that everything's okay. That it's really not as bad as it feels in the moment. And I think that you learn a lot about yourself when you take inventory of those moments that kind of make your heart race, or make your blood pressure maybe go up, and I'm always like, pay attention. We have physical signs in our body all the time to what we're feeling.
And maybe asking yourself, like, why did I feel that way at that time?
Yes.
Like, why did that bother me so much?
That's right. That's right. And staying inquisitive about it instead of feeling anger indefinitely. Just asking some good questions about those moments, or sadness or anxiety. We had, a lot of that on the ranch. Where they were called out for something, and from the person that maybe had called them out, it wasn't the end of the world, but they took it as it was the end of, as a really, really hard moment. And so reevaluating that and going back to that to understand why you felt that or why you experienced that. And that's why I think any kind of job experience, any type of experience that gets you working with other humans and rubbing up against each other and figuring out how to do relationships in healthy ways, you are set up for life. You're set up for marriage. You're set up for being a parent. You're set up for really any job, any career. It's amazing what our staff at Lost Valley, even though they were waitresses or they were housekeepers.
Even though I will say they were like highly educated,
that's right,
biochemical degrees and all these crazy, amazing things, but they wanted to take a year and serve at the ranch.
Yeah.
But they really did develop amazing people skills. And I agree with you completely. I think that's one of the number one things we can give our children is the ability to communicate and work well with others.
That's right.
Because that is the life that we want to live in community with others, and relationally you have to have intentional development in those areas, because otherwise how else do you learn it?
That's right.
So I always tell my kids, I'm like, okay, really don't focus on mistakes made, but think of it more as lessons learned. So everything has a lesson out of it if you really try. So,
Absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
talk about, I'm going to let you choose here because I have more in my mind questions I want to ask you. Talk about either how you'd advise people to choose a spouse. I bet you have some good advice on that. But I also want to hear about, now that you don't work with your husbands, what do you miss, or what do you feel like, okay, not work? Because there's a lot of people that don't work with their spouse. Like, hey, what would be some good to-dos, with working with your husband?
I think I could answer both in
Oh.
a succinct way.
Okay, great.
Because we lived, with singles. We lived with single 20 to 25-year-olds. And of course, Tony and I always joked, we're like, if you don't find a spouse out here, where are you going to find one? So we had tons of marriages come out of Lost Valley
it's like
Ranch.
Chick-fil-A.
Yeah, it is. But what's funny is we have a no dating rule. And all of our guests were like, well, how does this keep happening? How does this keep happening?
Oh,
But we have a no dating rule, and what we said was, it actually is a great way to meet your spouse, because you
are working.
That's right. You're just working. You're just observing one another. You're learning about each other. There's safe boundaries. There's healthy parameters. You're not mixing in all the other junk that the other noise that can create confusion. And so it really is a great place to meet a spouse. But I would tell these young people, I'm like, at core values, we also have a Socratic method at Paterson Center to really narrow down to the 3 or 4 core values that you hold tight to, and it's almost instinctually. They're just there. And honestly, some of the main ways you can figure them out is if they've been violated, is if they've, and it's.
That's when you feel upset.
That's when you feel upset. And it's not a right or wrong. It's just they value something different. A lot of times in conflict, it's just someone that values something different. And there's still some common ground to find. And I do think that, my husband and I were examples of that, where we were so different and actually probably too much alike is really our issue. Like I said, we
both strong leaders.
Both strong leaders.
Vocal.
Yeah, very capable, very independent, and we rub each other the wrong way, and we are not quiet about it. And so I think, though, when I look at our 15-year journey at Lost Valley together, it worked because we had the same core values. Not all of them, but I'd say if you look at our papers, it's about 3 out of 4 are exactly the same. And I do think that makes a huge difference.
What are yours?
Integrity, authenticity, love. And for me, it's Christ-centeredness. So I have a relationship with Jesus Christ, and He is one of my core values that I cling closely to. So.
And you guys 3 out of the 4?
Yeah.
What do you know which one is?
I think
I could see it being very similar
I think
for Tony.
Instead of authenticity for him, it was toughness, like hard work, just a really strong work ethic. He came from extreme poverty and just learned how to work at an early age, and he's a cowboy. He's just got that grit about him, and you just go out there and get your hands dirty and
figure it out.
And you work hard. You do it till the end, till the job is done. So,
yeah. Okay. So, picking a spouse, would you say to just really know their core values?
Yeah, and I think anyone can do this. Anyone can figure out their core values without a Paterson Center facilitator. Again, it's paying attention to what, like when you go to a job interview, as the interviewee, what are you looking for? What are some things your antennas are going up about? What are some things in friendships? Someone that's close to you that you're drawn to, and why are you drawn to them? But I think so often we don't do that with our future spouse. We have romantic feelings about them, and
the attraction
and
first,
the attraction piece, and then we don't get down to like just the nitty gritty of, but is this someone who's going to raise kids similarly than me and work similarly than me, and just when the rubber hits the road, are we going to agree?
That is probably some of the hardest. I like how you say it, sparks flying off, but is just not being on the same page with maybe how we work, what work looks like. Yeah. Because you do that typically before you have children, right? And so I still remember this like moment where my husband's like, do you ever stop working? Before we had kids, I was like, oh, I don't. And, you know, he definitely has a better, I should say, balance, and just values like the day of rest, 1 day a week. And I wasn't doing that, you know, and I've learned the hard way though, that catches up to you. And so sometimes I adhere to that better than others, but I'm just saying that is probably some of our early conflicts, is just how we spent our time. And so, I mean, growth and over a lot of communication and a lot of counseling and things like that, we started to develop this real great appreciation for who we were. But understanding that was different, but same values overall, right? Of we earn our living, we hard work does matter, but it doesn't necessarily look the same.
That's right.
Compared to how he sees it and I see it, but because he definitely works just as hard as me, if not harder, but just how that pace looks is just different. And so we learned, but it took a lot of discovering of like, is this an argument against you and me, or is this do we still have the same, do we believe the same thing about this? And then you fast forward to parenting, same thing. Do we believe the same about parenting? We're just showing up differently with how that's executed with the discipline or with whatever it may be. And I'll tell you, we could not be more opposites. I mean, we really are, but we have all the same values. And so it keeps bringing us back to, and I really just hope and pray that my kids turn out with that balance, because it's probably not all him, not all me, but the blend, you know, of the two parents and what we bring to the table. But we do talk often with our kids about, hey, this is what we value. This is what our family's about. Similarly to how you explain like a mission statement or a vision statement for yourself, we have one for our family. And I think it's really good. Every Sunday night, we really make a point to remind our team, our family. Well, they're my team.
Yeah, they are your team.
They are my little team.
That's
right.
But
those four little people, and my husband and I, we talk about kind of our theme for our family, and we try to tell stories of over the last 18 years how God has been faithful to our family, or how we've been through tough times, or maybe what our grandparents or our parents have done to make us who we are today.
Legacy is huge.
You have to keep reminding those stories. I mean, I think the Native Americans really have something to the whole circle around the fire and tell the stories.
Right.
Because when we don't circle up around the dinner table and tell the stories, how in the world are the last two generations going to know about what mistakes we've made so we don't make them again?
That's right.
What gratitude even for what they've been through so we can even be here today. So it's just so important to me. But I think the regular, for us right now, it's just the regular reminding of those values, the regular reminding of our mission as a family is just where we're at. It's kind of like, I hope they catch on one day when they move on. But it's like, I heard this in business recently, is that there's a business coach that highly recommends having someone on your team that's not a CFO, COO, whatever, but a CRO, a chief reminding officer. And the only thing that they do is they go around one department at a time. Like, I don't know, depends on the size of your company, but just kind of reminding them of like the purpose of their department, why they're on mission, what they are doing. Let's make sure we stay on track here. We don't get off on the right or the left. And all that person's role is a chief reminding officer. And I'm like, that's so obvious, but actually so brilliant. So brilliant. Because we get off track so much, whether it be in our marriage or in our friendships, and we get off track and we forget, okay, this was the purpose of us belonging to each other. And that's what I want to remind my kids. It's like, this is what the Linscombe family is all about. This is what we value. These are our hardships, but this is where we're headed. And this is part of the story that you're jumping in on right now, but it's actually 1,000 generations. So this is your little pass the baton moment.
That's right.
And then, you know, you're going to have your own unique story. Trust me, I totally believe that. Like, I'm like, you're going to have your own unique story to say.
And
but
all of history.
It's all of history.
That's right.
And it's like, but I think you have a really great just purpose in your work, because you're highlighting themes for people to say, this is your story. Like, now go make it count. And like, I love that question. What is your contribution?
What's your greatest contribution?
What's your greatest?
And that's really what we're trying at the end of the and, you know, it comes in all different forms. It's not, and that's where I think so often we think it's one career, one job, and Paterson Center works in personal in the whole process, we touch on personal, family, vocational, and community. And so it's every hat we wear, we can bring the best parts of ourselves to. And it's just a choice. And it's knowing what that is, first of all, being aware of it.
Apply that to all your
and
roles.
then, yes. I mean, I think one of the more impactful, I shared about homeschooling because I was kind of bitter about having to homeschool, to
You're
be
like,
quite
why
honest.
me?
Yeah, to be quite honest. And that was one role in my life that I saw it play out in such a healthier way. But also as a daughter, I just hadn't, with my parents, I think as a middle child, I was a little bit, what's my place? What's my role? I struggled with comparison. I have 2 sisters. And I realized that if I were to bring all of them, my, extended family, my best self. And it really has been true this last decade, that they've gotten the best parts of me.
How did it change your relationship with?
I think, as you grow old, you start, or as you age, you start realizing the questions start looking different about parents, and you have your nuclear family and you kind of operate one way with my kids as a mom and a wife. But I think as you age, you start asking, okay, how can I honor and bless my parents as they age? Because I do think that's the natural order of life. And part of the way I was not doing that was, I think I was still in that mindset of, what do they give to me? What do they provide for me? And so it was a big shift for me as a daughter to start asking, how can I bring this gift of hospitality to my parents? How can I, I know I'm a good connector of people. How do I do that, in my family now as an adult? So these were traits that had come up in my life plan that I realized I wasn't doing for the people that were closest to me.
So tell us, if someone wanted to do a life plan, first of all, where could they contact you? But then also, who do you feel like it's for?
I think it's for everyone, but I will say it's a financial investment. I didn't finish, but it's for individuals. It's a 2-day process. And for couples, I can meet with couples. It's a 3-day process. But if they go to my website, it's brookewarnock.com, or they could email at hello@brookewarnock.com. If they want to do a little more research on it, I would say Paterson Center. I think it's just patersоncenter.com.
Mm-hmm. And you would say it's for anybody kind of seeking a little bit more direction? I think
most people end up in that room if they're in the middle of transition. If there is a belief that we are in certain phases of discovery all the time. And I think I do get a lot of 20 to 25-year-olds, and then I get a lot of empty nesters. I do tend to think that
those are major. Those are
transitional
times in life.
That's right.
And crossroads. I would say it's like, okay, am I going to go this way or this?
Yeah. So I think that is the client that ends up with me the most. But I went because I was having a lot of fights with my husband, and trying to figure out how to work with him. And it just we weren't able to do it on our own.
Wow.
And so I really think that it could be for anybody. It truly is just a tool of many that can bring about just a little more vision, a little more clarity on purpose. And if you want just a little more confidence in what to say yes to, what to say no to, even when you were talking about family values, I know a lot of families who, put that up on, or mission statements, who put it up on their wall. And what if we applied that to social media and what we post and so that you're just always putting your decisions through a grid, sifting, any decision that you make. And I think that those tools, again, life planning is one of, there's lots of tools out there that are good and healthy, but it for me has been incredibly impactful.
Well, I had some friends just recently do this with you, and they said it was so good that they were wrecked in all the best ways, but they were wrecked to realize, hey, this is really something we didn't see that we both had in common, where we were headed as a husband and wife, and what that next season would look like, because they had been working separately, kind of doing their own careers, and their kids are about to transition out, and they're thinking, wait, what's this next season look like for the two of us?
Right,
And they
right.
left with so much like glimmer in their eyes with excitement about their future, which to me is so much hope to
Right,
think we
right.
have a future, we have something to be excited about, instead of being like, this is gonna, be the worst thing ever. No, it's actually like, no, how could this be great?
Yeah.
How could this be great? And so I just love getting to talk with you, hearing more about this whole, option to talk through a life plan with someone. And like you said, there's many people out there, but I definitely think Brooke Warnock's the one. And, but to learn, like I said, what needs to be our next steps. But Brooke, I'm so glad we talked about this.
Oh, Mindi,
It was awesome.
It's a pleasure.
And I'd love to have you introduce to me your favorite drink before we leave our episode today.
Yes.
What did you bring to the studio?
So I am introducing you to, down neighborhood coffee shop
Yes.
down the road.
Both of our neighborhood coffee shops. Yep.
Uh-huh. They do flavors of the week, kombucha. And what I love about it, I go to that coffee shop quite a bit, and I get a soft boiled egg and toast and really, really, really good bacon. And it is a treat. And then I get when it's not to go, it's in a wine glass.
Nice.
And I think anything sparkling in a wine glass
Just
feels
elevates.
special.
Yes,
right?
it elevates the experience.
It just
100%.
feels special. And so I am introducing you to
The
flavor of the week. I don't know. I'm not real
Do you
sure
know what
it is.
today's flavor is? Watermelon what? Jalapeno.
Let's try
Watermelon
it. Do you think it's
jalapeno
spicy?
kombucha? I don't
think
know.
it's
Okay,
spicy?
1, 2, 3. Cheers.
Cheers.
Whoa.
It's not spicy.
I was expecting way more jalapeno. I think it's more watermelon with a dash of jalapeno.
It's real fresh. It's real crisp
Very
and
fresh. Well, that's delicious. I'm so glad to have you here. And again, thank you guys for attending the show with us today. It's so fun to dive into these deep topics together. And if you enjoyed the episode, please like, comment, and especially subscribe, share with your friends. We appreciate it. And we're so glad you're joining us to learn how to live a life worth celebrating. Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe to the show, rate, review, and share with a friend. Also, follow the Something New Show on Instagram and Facebook. If you want a fuller experience, watch the show on YouTube to help you create a life worth celebrating.